So this paddling song is used for welcoming our guests to our land. Whoa, whoa, yeah. Whoa, whoa, yeah. Whoa, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, oh, yeah. Whoa, oh, yeah. Hey, we are, we are, oh, yeah, hey, hey, hey. Oh, ooh, 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 we are, we are, oh, yeah, hey, hey, hey. Oh, who, who, who? Welcome to Clayoquot Sound. You're sitting on it. We come from one of the oldest villages on Vancouver Island, which is the one across from Tofino here. It's Hope It's It. The first Europeans arrived here. The population of our tribe was between 7,000 and 10,000 people living at Opitsit and several locations along in that photograph there. And they had Opitsit. It was the main village, like a meeting place. And that was where all of our cultural businesses were done, was at that village. And that is where it kind of took off again there back in 1984 when my uncle Moses Martin was the chief counselor of our tribe, blockading on Mears Island. And I want to say thank you all very much for coming.
Hi, we'll start just very quickly and right in the middle of things. In 1988, a guy named Diver Dave, none of us can remember his last name, was in his boat going up towards the Meejan River, and all of a sudden there was an explosion and rocks started to fall into the water around his boat, and he hightailed it back to the Friends of Clayoquot Sound and said, "What's going on?" And then Valerie Langer, who I think had just come to Tofino, and Adrian Dorst went up and discovered that there was a logging road being put through a place called Sulphur Pass. And so Maureen Fraser and some other people got together and said, "What can we do about this?" And well, they weren't allowed to blast if there were people in the vicinity, so they decided on a naval blockade. And all these little boats went up, and then C.J. Hinkey pitched a tent on the roadside, and more people joined that. So, meanwhile, that summer, I'm living in Vancouver, but my heart's up there, so I wrote a little song inviting people to the protest. But the trouble is I'm a really slow writer, and I didn't finish it until the fall, and by then the protesters had gone home and the loggers had gone home. But people continued to sing it. And then, moving ahead, in 1994, I was finally recording, and that was when the trials were going on for the protesters in 93. And so many people were so incensed at what was going on, including the artists, so it became very easy to phone Valdi and Rick Scott and Roy Forbes and various musical friends and say, "Hey, I want to record this song." So they all came in, and then a filmmaker named Nettie Wild got wind of it, and she said, if you can get enough money together for film stock and sushi for the crew, we'll make a video. And it kind of went viral, and I'll introduce the director, Nettie Wild.
Well, it really helps when somebody decides to write an anthem. And it's the only music video I've ever made. And I don't think you need to make another one when you have a good song like this one. I also want to, besides thanking the artists that you'll see performing this, send out a big vote of thanks to our crew, two of whom are in the back, Gary Marcuse and Betsy Carson. Just wave your hands. They're people, if you take a look at any of my films, you'll see these two names and a host of others come up. It's an extended filmmaking family. And the other thing that was really extraordinary, besides reaching out to the performing artists, we reached out to all the activists and people who are activists in the media to give us their footage. And it all came flooding in. And the result you'll see in the next few minutes. So when the credits run at the end, we'll keep the lights down and take a look and give them a big round of applause as well. So, without further ado.
The credits are a little bit longer than the film. And among them is Warren Rudd, who was one of the people who helped the Rudd.
So if we could roll, and I'll put this.
No Passaran.
No
Esquart River.
Passaran. Clayoquot
No
River.
Passaran.
No
Vargas
Passaran.
Island.
Come, you bold men of Clayoquot, come, you bold women. There is a fire burning on the mountain, the sting of smoke blown in the wind.
Hear the blast of the whistle, hear the snarl of the chain.
Hear the cracking in the heartwood, hear it again and again and again.
No Passaran,
Meeting River,
no Passaran. Clayoquot River,
No Passaran, Sulphur Passage.
there's a valley torn asunder, there's a mountain stripped of bone. Grove of spruce, stand of cedar, the ancient garden, sacked and burned.
Hear the blast of the whistle, hear the snarl of the chain, hear the crack in the hardwood, hear it again and again and again. No Passaran, Midget River, no Passaran, Clayoquot River, no Passaran, Sulphur Passage.
Come, you bold men of Clayoquot, come, you bold women. There is a cry deep within the forest, hear the whisper in the wind.
Hear the breath in the cedar, sighing in the slough. The beating deep within the forest, the grouse, the thrush, the great horned owl. We'll stand with these cedars, stand in these balsam groves. Stand with the hare and the cougar, the otter, like a tree by the water, we shall not move.
no Passaran,
Midget River,
no Passaran,
Clayoquot River,
no Passaran. Sulphur Passage.
Oh, come, you bold men of Clayoquot, come, you bold women. There's a fire burning on the mountain, the sting of smoke blown in the wind.
Hear the blast of the whistle, hear the snarl of the chain, hear the cracking in the heartwood, hear it again and again and again. No passerà, Meeting River, no passerà, Blackwood River, no passerà, Flores Island, no passerà, Vargas Island, no passerà, Versus River, no passerà, Ashland River, no passerà, South of Passage.
I almost cry every time I see that video. So, and I've seen it more times than Emery, and I'm still not over it. So, gathering myself back together. I was asked to just do a 10-minute introduction to Clayoquot Sound for people who are here who may not actually know Clayoquot Sound, who might just be visiting, who don't really have that grounding that some of us have had for 20 years of having been here and participated. So in a few seconds up on that screen, I'm going to do like the really fast talking 25,000 years in 10 minutes. Actually, not quite that long. I'm going to take you a little bit through the history of an evolution of a temperate rainforest, why we're here in the first place, and then a little bit about the what happened. So Clayoquot Sound, it's 262,000 hectares of some of the most glorious temperate rainforests in the world. It's part of a temperate rainforest zone, includes the Great Bear, all the way rainforest, and all the way down Vancouver Island. These are the two big intact areas, the Great Bear and Clayoquot Sound on the coast of North America. It's the real big tree forest. These are places where trees will grow to be 1,500 years old and up to 20 feet in diameter, of big red cedar. And certain people, even though they are only 5'2", look even more like munchkins when they're amongst these trees, Marika. There's really a seamless ocean forest ecosystem here. It's really hard to tell where the ocean stops and the forest begins, and the forest stops and the ocean begins. That's really interconnected. The fog is an ocean fog. It's also a forest fog, and it delivers this incredible, rich ecosystem, which is one of the most important migratory bird stopovers in North America, on the west coast of North America, when 10,000 whimbrels might come through at one time, and dowitchers and all the other coastal birds that are on their way up to Alaska. It's also home to these incredible mammal predators that are the top mammal predators of the ecosystems, the cougar, the bear that eat the salmon, which are the lifeblood of this forest. The eagles, which also come gathering. Sometimes you can see 200 eagles in around an estuary when the salmon are running. So really rich life that's held together in some ways by the salmon itself, which some people think of as an ocean creature, but they're really a forest creature. Those of us on the forest campaign side, we're going to say that the salmon are a forest creature because they're born in the forest. Then after a year, they go out to the ocean. They swim around like teenagers having a good time. Then they always come home again, back to the forest. And that's when everything kind of goes lively again, when the bears come down, the eagles and the seals and the orca whales all gather to eat. This forest evolved since the Ice Age retreated, and lockstep with the forest, the evolution of a really rich First Nations culture. For 10,000 years, it's only been 6,000 years that the cedar have been here. About 10,000 years of cultural evolution that has paralleled. There's been no time There's been no time when the forest has not had people in it since the Ice Age. So these are co-evolved forests with humans, unlike the tropical rainforest, which is quite different. So Joe Martin, as you saw him leading us through an aspect of their culture while we're on Clayoquot land, has done this for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that he and his family have taken out into the forest. This is part of the beauty of Clayoquot Sound. It's part of the politics of Clayoquot Sound. Because back in 1984, when First Nations and the Friends of Clayoquot Sound pulled together to block McMillan Bloedel from logging Mears Island, which is the front doorstep of Tofino, it seemed like a David and Goliath kind of a fight, where you had these small local populations fighting the biggest multinational corporation logging in British Columbia. It was taken down to the legislature steps when the First Nations erected the welcoming sculpture. It's now at the Museum of Anthropology if you ever want to see that thing live and stand at its massive feet. Those protests were because this kind of logging was happening in Clayoquot Sound, up one side of a mountain across the valley and up the other side and down the next valley. And in 14 years of the Friends of Clayoquot Sound's existence, there were protests and letter writing to government, and the logs just kept on coming out. You would have all these logs going out to the pulp mill and the sawmill in Port Alberni. And we were not taking the sitting down. Well, some of us were sitting down, but we were sitting in a very particular way to try and stop things from getting worse. And over those years, there were a lot of people who got arrested to protect these majestic forests. We tried to have a sustainable development strategy. It went on for 4 years to try and work this out in a civilized manner, talking things through with science and negotiations, and that didn't work. And by the end of 1992, with a failed sustainable development process for Clayoquot Sound, when we said, we're not going to do valley by valley fights, we're not going to fight you in this cut block and then the next one and then the next one, we want a plan for all of Clayoquot Sound. When that did not work out, everybody was wondering, what's next in Clayoquot Sound? What the heck is going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what happened. 10% of Tofino had already been arrested by this point in 1992. Oops, I have no idea what just happened there. There we go. There was the big shift. Let me just go back. The big shift was this. The local group, Friends of Clayoquot Sound, made 3 strategic decisions that changed the way in which we worked. First, raise the profile outside of the area. Nobody was listening at home, so let's go outside, go to Europe, Japan, other places, and raise the profile internationally. Second, make big friends. So we were making Karen Mahan here, who was one of my big friends. She's not that tall, but she was actually pretty powerful. And so we got Greenpeace involved and Friends of the Earth in Europe and a number of organizations to take on the Clayoquot campaign. And then we started convincing McMillan Bloedel's corporate customers, those who bought the paper and the wood from them, to cancel their contracts. We were able to get about $10 million worth of contracts canceled, but that was yet to come. First came the uprising, and that was in July of 1993 when we set up the Clayoquot Peace Camp with the Code of Nonviolence, and people came in droves, and it was really quite astounding. Terry, who's going to be is the guy on the tall guy on the left-hand side of the photo. Also, there's Sven Robinson on the right-hand side of the photo. Paul Stas, the guy in the very far end, European member of the European Parliament for Belgium, was there. This was first. It started fairly small, and then it built. And it built by community. It built with people joyously actually putting their liberty on the line because they were finally saying to the public, to the authorities, this is what we believe in. We are standing here in a principled manner. We are going to stand here. You will not have me willingly leave this spot. So it was nonviolent and sometimes elated civil disobedience. We organized by affinity groups, Doctors for Clayoquot, Youth for Clayoquot. There was forest industry workers for unsustainable against unsustainable forestry, international protest days. It was done by affinity group. So there's the forest workers who came up one day, totally surprised me. They just walked into the office one day, said, "We're here, we have a banner, where should we go?" Yeah. So this was this incredible outpouring where people came from all over the world. And by the end of it, literally the end, in October 4th of 1993, when the executive directors of Greenpeace International came to get arrested from Australia, Austria, the Netherlands, they were from all over the world, and they came. And in this picture, Chris Hatch, who is in the audience as well, is one of the guys with his arms locked into one of the barrels. The guy on the right-hand side is here today. So that's when we started a coalition called the Clayoquot Rainforest Coalition with Natural Resources Defense Council, Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s group, Rainforest Action Network, Greenpeace, and Friends of Clayoquot Sound, and we started going after the customers of McMillan Bloedel in their marketplace. This was the shift time. In a period of 3.5 months, everything changed in this area. Is there more to do? Absolutely. We were able to get major contract cancellations. We got, the city of Santa Cruz and the New York Times publishing ads, and the Marin County saying they weren't going to use paper that came from Clayoquot Sound. We had people hanging banners off of tall buildings in San Francisco and New York City. We started the Forest Stewardship Council certification process because customers were saying to us, well, if we don't buy from Clayoquot, where should we buy from? And there was nowhere good to go. There just wasn't anywhere in the world where people were really doing good logging. So we helped, and Greenpeace, Karen was part of the original group starting the Forest Stewardship Council certification process. And eventually things started to shift. McMillan Bloedel made their graceful exit, slowly but surely, out of Clayoquot Sound, and First Nations took control of the tenures. So it's a very different picture today than it was in 1993. We still have a number of the intact valleys of Clayoquot Sound that are unprotected. Places like the Ursus, the Bolson, Flores Island, Clayoquot River Valley, Sachi Creek, Heshquit Point Creek that are unprotected, and the negotiations are ongoing. So there are a number of organizations still today working to protect the forests of Clayoquot Sound. But we are in, let me give you an idea. In 1989, there was 900,000 cubic meters of wood logged out of Clayoquot Sound every year. This year, it was under 150,000, from 900,000 to 150,000. So we've had great success. There's a lot of change. The whole place has inspired other organizations to do similar kind of work. The Great Bear Rainforest, the Boreal Forest, the way that environmental groups work in Indonesia now has changed completely because of what happened in 1993. So that's where we are now. There's a light still ahead. There's more to do, but it's hopeful. And with that, I think we can start exchanging some stories with the people who were here 20 years ago as part of the Clayoquot blockades of 1993.
My name is Josie Osborne, and it is my privilege to be the mayor of Tofino. Big honor indeed. Thank you. But tonight it is truly my privilege and indeed an honor to be the moderator for the panel. And when I was asked to be the moderator for the panel, I didn't hesitate, not 1 second. I said, absolutely. Because I am so proud of all the work that has gone on up to 20 years ago, and to today that makes this community such a fantastic community to be a part of. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to invite everybody up and do a brief introduction of our panelists tonight. And they're going to take their time tonight to tell us about what it was like 20 years ago. So my introduction is a little bit more about what they're doing today, and it'll be very short. You have a sheet of paper, some of you, that you had when you got when you came in, and here it is. And so there's a longer bio for each of our panelists tonight, which you can take the time to read. And of course, we've already met Valerie Langer, so thank you, Valerie, for agreeing to be part of our panel tonight. And Valerie, she helped form a group that later became Forest Ethics and is still with Forest Ethics today. We'll hear maybe a little bit about that, but mostly about what she was doing 20 years ago. The next person I'd like to invite up to the stage is John Kishore. John, come on up. So John has an interesting history of 25 years with the United Church and 15 years in politics. But today, he tells me he's retired, but his wife says otherwise. He's busy working on the cabin on Cortez Island. He volunteers with the Georgia Strait Alliance, and he does work with homelessness issues in the downtown east side. So welcome, John, and thank you very much for being part of the panel. The next person I'd like to invite up is Karen Mahan. Karen, come on up. It's like The Price is Right. Come on up. This is better than a game show. So Karen is now a director of Public Outreach, a company that fundraises for nonprofit groups via canvassing and recruits tens of thousands of new donors for these organizations. But she was doing something different 20 years ago, and we'll hear about that in a bit. Thank you, Karen, for coming out tonight. So Terry was at dinner tonight. Some of us got together at Sobo and had a great dinner before we came to the panel. And Terry was telling me about what he does, but he's changed his t-shirt. Oh, he had a different t-shirt on for dinner, and it got me asking, well, what is it that you do, Terry? And he does some fantastic work underwater, in the water, around the water, with cameras, with video equipment. And his whole thing now over in Palo River, where he lives, is inspiring people to look at the liquid around us and to explore that and all of the amazing ecosystems and ponds and rivers and lakes and the ocean. So thank you, Terry, for being here tonight. Next, I'd like to invite up Zipporah Berman. Zipporah is here. It's a real pleasure for me to meet Zipporah tonight. It's the first time I've had the pleasure of meeting her. And she works now as a strategic advisor for a number of different environmental organizations, First Nations, philanthropic advisors on clean energy, oil sands, and pipelines. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And Maureen Fraser. Most of us know Maureen as the proprietress of the Common Loaf Bake Shop. If you haven't been there, you must go there. And you must have a cinnamon bun. Thank you so much, Maureen, for being here tonight. And next, Joe Martin. Come on up, Joe. We've already met Joe tonight, and as you have already learned, his family, his people have been here on this land for thousands of years, and it's a real privilege for us to be able to live in Clayoquot, Kahoti, and thank you, Joe, for your welcome tonight. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome up Elizabeth May. So I'm sure as most of you know, Elizabeth is the leader of the Green Party of Canada and a member of Parliament for Sandwich Gulf Islands. Sandwich Gulf Islands, thank you. And before we really get going, I think I want to just remark on what a great living room this is. and that's really what we're doing. So this is a panel. We had a little huddle before the panel started, and somebody remarked, this is the biggest panel I've ever been a part of. It's not a panel, it's a committee. But we tried to make a living room atmosphere because what we want to do tonight is have a conversation amongst ourselves here as panelists and with me as the moderator in front of you, the audience. But then we'll take time for questions and from the audience and have the panelists answer those. And then when we're done that, we're going to stay around and have a social atmosphere, and there'll be plenty of chances for you to come up and meet the panelists and have some food and some coffee or tea and that. So that's kind of how tonight's going to roll out. What I'm going to do first is, you've got some mics in front of there, we all get to share. But I'm going to ask each of the panelists, and we're going to start with Valerie and come all the way down to Elizabeth, just to take 90 seconds or 2 minutes to cast your mind back to 20 years ago and tell us what you were doing and how you got to be involved. Take it away.
Okay. I was running a bed and breakfast. I was trying to feed my guests. They would get up and have breakfast by 7, so I had to get out to the Blockade, figure out what was going on, come back and do media, and have the guests' breakfast ready by 7. So it was tough, but it was managed. People started to call it the bed and arrested because so many of my guests, the easiest way was to bring them out with me, so then I would never be late for them. And so it was. I was juggling, just trying to make a living with trying to save the sound, and that's what we called it then. I think of it more complexly now, but there was basically a time of no sleeping, and tremendous kind of energy. Real inspiration from people who came out, and a lot of surprises. When we started this, I said, we're going to get 1,000 people out, and Karen said, don't talk about numbers. What if 1,000 people don't come? But we were thinking big at 1,000. So I was ready for something new. I'd done some pretty kind of radical actions. I'd gotten a really sore bum sitting out on that pole on the end of a log, and you realize that you can be locked down to something for a long time, and if nobody's coming along to do the next step, like to get it beyond that blockade, that one individual action, you could be sitting out there locked down to something for many years. And that's what I was thinking. We're going to do this thing, and I think I said to Chris Hatch, we'll have this all wrapped up by October. So those were that's what I was thinking 20 years ago. So it's 20 years, it's about to get it wrapped up, don't you think?
I want to ask you a question, but I don't know if I can see the answer. How many of you were here in 1956? Somebody said on Earth? Well, in 1956, at the age of 21, I was camped with a survey crew on the banks of the Kennedy River, 9 miles up from the lake. Surveying the road was also going to be a game changer for the area. And who would have thought that, I think it was, my math is right, 36 years later, I was on Radar Hill with Mike Harcourt and Dan Miller making an announcement. Who would have thought that this kid that was camped on Kennedy River would be making that announcement, which has become such an international, planet-wide event and has had so much impact with so many things in so many ways, and the outcome really does bode well for the future, even though there was a lot of suffering. A lot of people have scars on their back from what they experienced then. And then, who would have thought that 20 years after that, I would be invited into your living room to take part in a time of reflection. And I know that's going to be happening. And before I pass the mic on, I just want to say how valuable and how important it is that when value-centered people are willing to give up something in order to achieve a goal, and you had the 3 points up here, showing how you were going about that, it meant you were focused. And people who become focused for a cause are people that know how to accomplish things. And our planet really needs that right now.
Thanks, John. I moved here to British Columbia from Ontario, where I was the acting executive director of Greenpeace in Canada. And I did that job for a little while and then quickly demoted myself to forest campaigner so I could come out west and work on the forest campaign. And I worked for Greenpeace, and like any big organization, Greenpeace has its strengths and weaknesses, and when it is really effective is when we can tie the international reach and analysis of a big NGO like Greenpeace to a real, live, powerful, on-the-ground struggle, which is what we had here in Clayoquot Sound. And this woman, Valerie Langer, called me and said, hey, we need to make big friends. Want to work together? And that seemed like a good idea. Then the Clayoquot Sound land use decision came out. And I remember one of my favorite things that we did is we took out a full-page ad in the Globe and Mail that said, 11% of Canadians support the decision to allow clear-cut logging in 2/3 of Clayoquot Sound. 17% of Canadians think Elvis is still alive. And that pretty much embodied the sentiment of the times. And so we said, you know, the Friends had been blockading for years, 5 people 1 year, 10 people, and we said, well, why don't we just go for it? Why don't we see how big we can make this thing? Why don't we just put out the call, Canada-wide, work with the Sierra Club, invite people from all across Canada, invite people internationally. Let's just build it, and they will come. We know they will come. And we had a meeting with the Friends, and we said, okay, are we going to do this thing? Are we going to do it big? And one of the Friends organizers said, are you telling me to buy a second cook stove? I said, yes, we'll need at least 2 more burners. Of course, we ended up feeding 300 and 400 people every night in the peace camp for the rest of the summer. And then just one last story is, we just had this vision of we felt the temperature of the public sentiment and knew that people had enough. And this was the moment where enough was enough. So we just put out the call and said, come. We did civil disobedience trainings in Stanley Park. Hundreds of people came to be trained in civil disobedience. Who knew that many people would show up? And they did. We were in the meeting. When should the blockade start? And we decided July 5th. So we took it. This was in the days of fax. That's how we communicated, by fax. And so that was fancy. We were sophisticated. And so we had a big piece of paper, and we typed out on the computer in like 1.5 inch high letters, Clayoquot blockades begin July 5th. And we whited out the header on the fax machine, and we sent it out, for the new news cycle. And so it was going through our fax machine, and we had the TV on the boardroom, and the air, it was so potent in the province. The atmosphere was so focused that we just watched the fax go out, and 10 minutes later, sure enough, on the news, the broadcaster on the new news says, have to interrupt this broadcast, news just in, Clayoquot blockades begin July 5th. And we knew our work was done.
Well, for me, it was love and a clear cut that drew me to the blockades. The clear cut was the infamous black hole, which I saw in 1987 when I came out to Clayoquot Sound. I'd been here before in 1981, drove out, and that clear cut covered the whole mountainside and down the back side of the mountain. And for the whole time I was here that trip, I could hear that mountain crying to me. And this mountain was crying in pain for the forests and the animals who were gone, were destroyed. And I was just feeling her pain, and she was trying to communicate with a person of the human race who had done this to the forest and the animals. And I remember praying at that time, setting an intention that I want to continue to listen to all beings, and listen to what they have to say to us, and to be a spokesperson for them to humans. And 6 years later, I had an opportunity to do that. And in between, I had some amazing experiences in Clayoquot Sound. I was on a solo kayak trip where I was sleeping right out in the open on the shore. Put my sleeping bag down beside the shore, and I was listening to the kerplunk of salmon and seals leaping, and the star fields were just whirling above me. And then I saw this rippling curtain of neon green on the horizon. The northern lights started to glow. And I thought, this can't get any better. And then the wolves started to howl. Arrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr my whole body, my whole spirit was resonating with this song of Clayoquot Sound. I was vibrating like a guitar string. So how could I not stand up for Clayoquot Sound? How could I resist the call when Val and Garth came to Vancouver? They did their slideshow and said, we're going to have some blockades and, come on out. So I responded to that. And that gave me the opportunity to be a spokesperson for the wild things of Clayoquot Sound when CBC recorded my arrest statement.
He's only got the one shirt. He wears it every day.
This shirt is like Clayoquot Sound now, a little bit tattered and a little bit holy, but fairly intact after 20 years.
That was so much more eloquent than me, Terry, because when I was arrested, I was standing at the side of the road having coffee with Val. And having been a spokesperson, so during the blockades 20 years ago, I was a spokesperson and I was always on the megaphone trying to organize people and things like that. I was the Friends of Clayoquot Sound blockade coordinator. And I was standing at the side of the road, and there's all these people who had made the decision to be arrested, and they're standing at the front of the logging trucks, and all the police start talking to each other, and they go around all the people arrested, and then they come around to me and arrest me. And all I said was, what? I was like, really? All that training and that, what? You can't, what do you mean, you're what? I'm not even blocking the road. It was horrible. Luckily that wasn't on TV though. It wasn't on TV. So I was arrested in Clayoquot Sound and charged with 857 counts of criminal aiding and abetting. But I think I ended up in Clayoquot Sound in '93 because Val told me to. Actually, all roads lead back to Valerie. I was a university student and trying to figure out how social change is made, trying to really understand what to do when you wake up in the morning and you care about an issue, and what do you do? You can get a degree to become a lawyer and a scientist. It's hard to get a degree in muckraking. And so I was exploring it, and I fell in love with the temperate rainforest sitting in the University of Toronto geography class of Adrian Dorf's photo my professor was using, and I just thought, I just had no idea Canada had rainforests, and I was 22, so I got a backpack and all the money I had, and came out to British Columbia. I ended up volunteering for Western Canada Wilderness Committee in Carmana and Walbran and studying marbled murrelets. And I thought, okay, this is great. I want to be a scientist. I'm going to prove these endangered seabirds depend on the forest and then they won't log it. And so we proved they did, and we found their nest that summer. I guess that was 91. And then I came back in 92 and they had logged it. And it just all felt like, literally like we were running in front of the bulldozer, and I couldn't, the science was too slow, and the legal work, I started volunteering for Sale Legal Defense Fund, and that was so slow, and I couldn't figure out what to do, and this van of people pulled up and they said, well, the community in Tofino is blockading, and I'd never been to a protest in my life, and okay, I got into the van, and I was mostly terrified the summer of 1992, and I just cooked because I'm a good Jewish girl from Toronto and I know how to cook. And so I cooked and I learned, and I met a lot of wonderful people in Tofino, and they really inspired me. And then in April 93, when the decision happened, Valerie called and said, well, we've all been arrested and we can't go back there and we need your help. And so I came out to Clayoquot Sound. And it was a wild ride. The first couple of months, we literally just tried to figure out, how do we get people here? And how do we tell the story, as Karen said? And I remember standing in the Friends of Clayoquot Sound office, which was at the time, I think, in Valerie's house, in her loft, just sending faxes through to all the tree planting camps, because we figured those people like trees. You know, they're out there, they must like, and thank God I did, because my husband saw one of those faxes, I think, and he was the first protester to pull up to the Clayoquot Sound Peace Camp. Now we're married, so that, that worked out well. But, you know, it caused we just kind of, it was viral before there was viral. You know, this was a campaign that started before the internet. And I remember one day in the camp, I was like the fourth day, and people were flooding in. We were thinking, how are we going to feed people? And I can't remember the name of the bakery, but there was a bakery in Victoria that had heard about it and seen us on the news, and they sent a truck up, and this huge truck pulls up to the gates. We've got food for the camp. Thank God. And we open up the bags, and it's all muffin tops. Do you remember that? It was like bags and bags of muffin tops, you know, and things like that just kept happening. It was, quite a summer.
Well, I was here for many years in advance of all of this, and I guess to a certain degree it was very easy to get involved with the issue because I was standing looking at Mears Island in 1979 when we first heard that they were thinking of logging it, and I just looked at the slopes of Mears Island and thought, that is what I need to concentrate my energy on. There is no way that that should become a clear-cut massacre. And so from that point on, I joined the Friends of Clayoquot Sound and worked hard on the Mears Island campaign, and then worked also very hard on the Sulphur Passage campaign. And all the time running my business, my bake shop. And what was happening over that time period was Tofino was changing. People were coming, there were new businesses opening up, kayaking, whale watching, new resorts. And all of those businesses depended on the natural environment that we were surrounded by, that we were so fortunate. We were completely blasé about to a certain degree. And then, you know, in the Sulphur Passage days, it was very obvious that a logging operation in Sulphur Passage was going to be extremely detrimental to not only the forest, but to the whale watching companies, to the kayaking companies who were using those waterways. So the group of us business people in Tofino joined the Chamber of Commerce, basically took over the Chamber of Commerce, and took the radical stance of sending a telegram to the government demanding a moratorium on clear-cut logging until a sustainable development plan had been formulated for Clayoquot Sound. And the government was so shocked to have a business group, the Chamber of Commerce, making such a statement that they kind of, you know, they sat up and they paid attention. And I mean, this was very much from a business point of view. It wasn't dealing with First Nations issues at all. It wasn't dealing with the, you know, the environmental issues or the kind of the spiritual reasons that people had for wanting to protect forests. It was strictly, you know, there's jobs at stake in other industries, and we want to have a fairer division of things, if you want to look at it that way. Anyway, the result of it was 5 years of committees, meetings, task forces, steering committees, and all of which culminated finally in the Clayoquot land use decision. So I was blessed or cursed with sitting on those committees for 5 years, and that's how I got to what was happening in '93.
Prior to all of this stuff happening, I worked as a logger for 12 years. And there were days when I felt sick to the stomach because of what was happening, what I could see what I was doing as a logger. My father is a fisherman, and we're logging right over these streams. And then so anyhow, I was working in the Cyper River Valley. Beautiful, man, that place was so beautiful. And I think about the crime that they did to that place. It was amazing. You go through Cathedral Grove, the Cyper River Valley was beautiful. They just logged that all off. And then anyhow, I got fired from that spot because I didn't drag some logs across a fish-bearing stream. And that was, that day was like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. And I came across to this side immediately. I'm still here. Back in 1992, it began trips to Europe with slideshows and showing about all the things that are happening here in regards to the resources and so on. And in 1993, I made 2 trips to Europe, one in the spring and then one in the fall. It's the fall time. And during that fall of October, November that year was traveled with my oldest daughter, Giselle. And she was 16 years old at the time. And so anyhow, at that time I made a presentation to United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland about this disappearing rainforest here, and also 3 days at the European Parliament. And I met people from all of the countries that were concerned with their own forestry, and all of them did say that they cannot compete with Canada or British Columbia because our wood is so damn cheap. And it was hurting their economies, and they couldn't do anything about it. And then so in summer of 1994, a lot of those people that I did meet there, they flew here to come to look at Clayoquot Sound and then to see the forest. So they had arranged to meet with our tribal council and our own Clayoquot council. So they landed in Vancouver, and there they were intercepted by the Ministry of Forests, and they wouldn't fly them over. It was a beautiful, clear day, not a breath in the sky, not even a cloud. They said it's too stormy to fly over, because they would have seen all the clear cutting from their flight. And so, you know, we have had to put up with a lot of these things over these years, but I'm very grateful that we have, many of us in this room have done all this work, and we still have some forests here that are very significant. And one of the big concerns that I still do have right now is that, you know, we still have ESOC, the forest company, and I'm not really happy with them because they're just targeting the best forests that we have. And I'm a canoe builder. And, you know, the people that are going to come up behind me won't have those resources anymore, neither will you. And, you know, it's this kind of thing. These forest companies want to work here. I believe they just got to maintain and use their second growth and maintain that. It's yeah, I thought that at the time that would only be doing this for a small period of time, but it's still going on, and now my daughters are taking this on too.
First of all, I want to say what an enormous honor it is to be included in this panel, because I think I'm the only one sitting here who wasn't living in British Columbia and who participated in, I suppose I'm sitting here on behalf of a lot of Canadians across the country who were part of the campaign to save Clayoquot Sound, to stop clear-cut logging, but who wasn't really living here. And I just want to make a couple of higher order observations before I say what I did, because I think it's important. The singularity of the Clayoquot campaign was the strength and the moral courage of nonviolent civil disobedience that stuck to nonviolence. And that's critical. And it also is, forgive the gender analysis, a lot of this was women, a lot of this was inspired by Greenham Common in the UK as a peace camp of women who surrounded a military base. So there was a lot of strength and moral purpose there that I'm afraid we've lost in a lot of buzzwords and frankly dangerous nonsense like diversity of tactics. We have got to stick as a movement to nonviolent civil disobedience that knows its moral purpose and stands fast. And when Sephora Zipporah laughs about the number of charges she had. Let me just say how terrifying that was. Zipporah stood at risk of being put in jail for a long time because of the perversity and the corruption within a government system that would treat these brave people as guilty of criminal trespass instead of civil trespass, that threw the hardest, toughest sentences at nonviolent civil disobedience, that put people who was briefly on the No Pasaran in that video, we saw Betty Croswick, who was put in jail for a long, long time. I mean, I visited her in the jail. Her jailer said, oh, she's a model prisoner, she is. I mean, they all really liked her a lot, but I mean, this was really appalling that so many people had so many tough jail sentences and that they would grab Zipporah off the side of the road to try to shut down what was a brilliant, coordinated effort to get people on the road. So that's where I come in, is that I was executive director of Sierra Club of Canada. Our local BC Sierra Club was spearheaded by the magnificent, heroic Vicky Husband, and Vicky said, we got to get people on the road. And as Clayoquot summer wound down, as summers tragically tend to do, it gets cold, and there were fewer people at the Peace Camp. So we came up with this idea at Sierra Club of the Clayoquot Express. And we decided we'd start in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a van, because there's no train through Newfoundland, and we'd get to Halifax and board a train. I found the tattered remnants of one of the brochures for the Clayoquot Express with all the prices for berths and lodgings and how you do it. We had rallies en route, so we had a rally in St. John's, a rally in Corner Brook, a rally in Halifax, overnight rally Ottawa, overnight rally Toronto, and then on the train right through to Vancouver, overnight rally Vancouver, and then on to Tofino. We had an overnight rally in Victoria as well. We had on board the train at different times or at our overnight rallies, everyone from Margaret Atwood to Farley Mowat, Vancouver rally organized by William Deverell and Pierre Burton. We had the most Raffi sang, Holly Arnson, for those of you who know Holly, was an on-board troubadour, so that people who came on the Clayoquot Express didn't have to ride the whole way. We had people like Farley rode from Port Hope to Toronto, sang along with Holly. It was a really great experience. Valerie, I think you got on in Toronto. And Vicky got on in Edmonton, but we had arranged with Via Rail to have an entire coach car that was our basically workshop area. We had an audio, we had microphone system so you could actually have the songs and also have presentations, explain what was going on. And people would come and people would go, and people would come to the rallies. And we had quite a lot of people who jumped on board not planning to come. One young woman in Winnipeg, Sasha Capello, I remember, just said, I'm so inspired, I just bought a ticket, I'm getting on board. I say, do you have a toothbrush? Do you have anything? No. You know, we had one stowaway, that was bad. That was a kid from Ottawa, didn't tell his parents he was jumping on board, but he played a mean harmonica, and Holly argued we should keep him on board, so we paid his fare and called his parents, and God damned if the brat didn't get arrested, and I had told his parents he wouldn't get arrested, but he did. And it was a life-changing, absolutely brilliant, wonderful adventure of the Clayoquot Express. We got here in November. We had a meeting with Mike Harcourt in Victoria right before coming up, and we explained to him all the reasons we thought what he was doing was wrong. It's a miracle to me that I now love Mike Harcourt and we became friends, because on that day I really wasn't very happy with him. Anyway, I love Mike Harcourt now. He's a sometime constituent of mine, seeing he has a house on Pender, but anyway, it's a long story. The best thing about all of what we did together was that it was moral courage and pacifism put into action. And if you guys had been in charge of Occupy Wall Street, capitalism would be dead.
Thank you so much, everybody. So I'd like to go back to April 13th, 1993, the day that the Clayoquot land use decision was announced. And Val, tell us what was going on for you that day? What was going on in your arena?
I think that somehow we need to have a concept of turning anger around as we move into action. And if we move into action while we're still really angry and not allowing reflection, we're doing reflection here tonight, but if we allow ourselves to take action before we've done the reflection and before we're ready, it's, well, it's something like keeping your powder dry. We really have to find ways, working collaboratively, to come up with a plan and then allow respect to function. And I really think that when the adversary knows that they have your respect, in many ways it's more difficult for them to deal with it than if they can just return anger for anger.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but we'll take one more question from the audience, and that's my advance notice to the panel. We're going to move into a round of closing comments.
Hello. This is Peter speaking, and I'm not here to judge you, not yet anyways. And I came with some young friends here tonight. I don't see a lot of young people in the audience, and I think next time we organize this thing, we should organize it a bit earlier so all the young people who need to hear all this should be here. Yeah, and I just want to say thank you to everyone for all the motivation and inspiration tonight. My heart is beating like a drum. And my question tonight is for the MC, the mayor that I've not come to know, because I don't think the youth quite know you and your intentions yet. And I'm here to ask you and our elder, Mr. Martin, what is the next step? And what are you doing in your personal initiative to support what we're doing here tonight and what we're meeting for? Because we are living with the aftermath and we want to make a change.
Thank you. Okay, there's a first. I like it. Well, I'll tell you, 20 years ago, I had just finished my undergraduate degree in biology, and I was living in Banfield, and I was only vaguely aware of what was going on in Clayoquot Sound. The way that I found out about what was going on was that Midnight Oil was coming to Tofino. So I think I'm like a lot of other people who, have things in the background and sort of swirling around your head, but you haven't reached that moment in your life where you're ready to actually do something. So I don't know, Peter, if I can answer your question directly, and I'd love to talk to you more after this. But one of the first things that I decided to do was something I only decided to do about 8 months ago, and that was run for politics, run for office. Because I feel like I have something to contribute, and I feel like people were ready to get to know me and accept that and learn more about what I stand for. And as I listen to the conversation that's gone on tonight, one of the things that's really struck me is the message about getting engaged and getting involved. For me, my decision was to get involved by actually putting myself out there and talk about being out of your comfort zone. Yeah, try running for local. Try running for municipal politics, which is the closest level of government. It is to the people. I mean, it is the level of government that is held the most accountable. It is the one where people, pretty much everyone in Tofino has my cell phone number, and I actually answer my cell phone. So it's a brave new world for me, but something that I'm really passionate about. So I don't know if I've answered your question directly, but glad that you asked it. So thank you. We are here reflecting tonight, and one of the things that we agreed to ask the panel as a way of a closing comment before we go into the social side of tonight was what do you think the lasting legacy was of what happened in 1993? Well, I'm going to start at this end this time, if I might, with Elizabeth.
Well, it was a watershed moment for sure. In terms of legacy, I think it's been a positive one because the drawing the line in the sand in Clayoquot did lead to peace in the woods, out of war in the woods. The movement and the support said it wasn't always about civil disobedience, and then, as Valerie mentioned, I mean, it's figuring out how to go in that slideshow. How do we go talk to the markets where they're taking Clayoquot wood, and how do we stop other countries from wanting to import? So there's been a tremendous evolution and sophistication of how a movement protects its forests, but it's a larger issue than forests. I think it was a defining moment for the environmental movement across Canada that people would pull together, and it wasn't the first time. In a lot of ways, the campaign to create Guayahanas, the national park that exists in Haida Gwaii, which was then called the Campaign to Save South Moresby. I worked on that in the late 80s. There were a number of moments where we said, this is too precious to lose. This defines who we are as a people. This is part of the Canadian, the intrinsic value of Canadians is tied to our environment. And I think a lot of that was solidified. Now, in that context, lasting legacy is hard to pat ourselves on the back very far, because as Sephora just pointed out, not just the laws of the last 24 years, the Navigable Waters Protection Act was brought into being under Sir John A. Macdonald. This is more than 100 years old, the act that Harper just gutted. And the repeal of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, that was an act initially introduced by Brian Mulroney, finally Royal Assent under Jean Chrétien, but it's been around for decades and we've lost it. So it's hard to say exactly what our lasting legacy is. And I think we have to, I think in a 20-year retrospective like tonight, and I do say this from a positive place. I'm not pessimistic about this. We have got to get people to recognize we're in real trouble. And when you're in real trouble, it's not the time to hit the snooze button. It's actually the time to wake up, pick back up all the tools we've ever known, and they don't have to all be civil disobedience. In fact, I don't think civil disobedience post 9/11 is what it was pre 9/11. I can see anticipatory arrests of absolutely anybody who's even thinking of going near the Enbridge pipeline, way ahead of time. They're not going to wait to pick up Sephora off the side of the road once the arrests are started. They're going to pick up people like Sephora in their bedrooms before they've had a time to plan a damn thing. And they're going to be called eco-terrorists, and they're going to be put in jail. So please, for God's sake, don't wait till you're called to go out on a road. Now's the time to get really active and really busy and short quickly. Please, as British Columbians, we have to write letters to the editor of the mainstream press that affects central Canada, like the Globe and Mail, the National Post. We have to defend BC interests. We have to explain why we will never allow pipelines through Great Bear Rainforest, why we will not allow tankers in huge numbers out of the Port of Vancouver, why we don't want, you know what Enbridge's plan involves? I know we're not supposed to talk Enbridge, Clayoquot, but the Enbridge plan for the Twin Pipeline, the pipeline that starts at Kitimat and runs to Alberta will be bringing diluent that they plan to buy from the Middle East. This is not about getting an Alberta product to market. This is about getting cheap product, unprocessed, to other places for other jobs for other countries. That's why the unions are against it. So we have to explain this over and over and over again to our neighbors, to our friends, to enough people across Canada that they will never be able to get away with approving it, because this is not a time that we're going to be able to block it by putting our bodies in front of the pipelines and the bulldozers. We have to use democracy, and we have to do it fast.
We have many still concerns that come up after this logging protests, and the next one was mining, and of course fish farming. And yeah, gee whiz, at the time I thought I was only going to be doing this for a couple of weeks, but damn, 20 years later I'm still here. Doggone it anyway. I just want some peace. But I guess we're going to have to work for that, all of us together. And one of the other issues that our council has been dealing with recently is a fellow applying for a guide outfitting hunting license to this whole area. I said, Jesus, when is this going to end? We want a guide outfitter hunter here because we won't be able to do anything. Anyhow, our people have been dealing with that. And so, you know, in particular with this mining interest over here in Tranquil Creek, that is a really big concern for us because we're just trying to build up our fish stocks in this area, and we don't want that to happen. And certainly would be appreciating anyone's help in that regard, and I'm really happy to be here tonight and say thank you again.
Well, there's a couple of things that I think about as legacies, and they're legacies that come not just from 93, but from the whole process that led up to that. And I'm speaking just as a resident of Tofino, not as particularly from the environmental community point of view. But actually, what did come out of the protests in 93 was the science panel, which then set new logging standards all over British Columbia. That was incredibly positive. Obviously, none of that is ever enough, but it was better than what it was. And then the other thing that came out of it was the Central Region Board, which for about a dozen years afterwards was a group of First Nations, the First Nations of this area, as well as the representatives from the local communities from the area, working together on all of the land use decisions that affected Clayoquot Sound. That was absolutely radical. The first time that local governments and First Nations had been given that control of their area. I think we made some good decisions during that time period. Eventually, the government pulled back and took that power back away from the local governments and First Nations. But I think the long-standing result of that is a closer relationship for Tofino and the Clayoquot, and an understanding that we're stronger working together than we are working separately. And I think we're all going to benefit from that in the long term. The other thing that I've been thinking about as we've been discussing this, during the process that I sat on all of these external steering committees, where we had all these representatives from Port Alberni and Ucluelet and the logging companies, we in Tofino developed a local steering committee, which was used to kind of guide our local representatives to those processes. That local steering committee was amazing in that it was deliberately set up by Tofino to try and take a cross-section of Tofino society, get them all in a room together, and then hopefully be able to make some good decisions. A good model. And the result was that those people who were chosen because they came from the traditional parts of Tofino society, the logging people, the fishing families, just the old-timers who've been here forever, along with the new people, the new environmentalists, all of those people sitting in a room together, we slowly, over time, got to know each other's concerns, got to respect each other, and changed each other, going both ways. But basically, I think the main shift was that there was an understanding among the older residents of Tofino that things were changing, and that there were reasons for these protests against logging or against bear hunting, which was one of the big things at that time too. That it wasn't just that people wanted to stop somebody from having their job, it was that there were larger issues at stake, and that information got shared among the community. And by the time 93 came along, Tofino was not there at the blockades necessarily, although there were a number of people from Tofino who were there, but they were not protesting the blockades either. I think the community had come that far that we were now ready for this change, and that was major. So.
I'd forgotten about this until this panel tonight, but one of the things that did come out of the summer of '93 was the Nachalneth getting the first interim measures agreement in British Columbia, and it was one of the first times that we really were working together really well. And I can remember, did you say Moses is here? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Mose was chief at the time. Chief Mose Martin and Chief Counselor Nelson Keatla came to a bunch of us and said, look, we've got these meetings that we're doing for treaty with the province, and they were just really not going well. And we want to know, will you come and support us? And we said, okay. And he said, we don't want you to talk. we don't want you to say anything. We want you to come into the formal negotiations and just stand behind our chair silently and bear witness to this. We want them to know that we're working with you. And so we did. Do you remember, Val? And there was Vicky Husband and Adrian Carr and Karen and we all filed into this room in Victoria where they were having their formal meetings, and we just stood there the whole time. And it was this feeling of just being in support and also powerful. And it was the first interim measures agreement, so that was a direct, tangible piece, right? So I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I just wrote a book called This Crazy Time. It was published last year by Random House, and it's kind of stories from the last 20 years of environmental campaigns. And so I'm thinking a lot about what Clayoquot achieved. And what's interesting is I learned so much after publishing the book, because I keep getting these letters from people who are reading the book, and on Facebook and in my email, and people calling and saying, it was so, I loved reading your book, and I learned this so much of it, and they tell me their stories of Clayoquot Sound. Clayoquot Sound has changed thousands of people's lives. Like the stories that I've heard, I was studying to be a nurse, and then I decided I was going to be a biologist, and there was this one, and there was this, anyways, all these amazing stories of people who changed their lives, and now they're trying to find their feet again in this moment in time of what are our environmental challenges now. So I think the protests in Clayoquot Sound birthed a generation of activists. Across the country, woke up a lot of people. Of course, there were hard forest policy changes that happened, like the Forest Practices Code, that I think the government was scrambling to get its social license and trying to do as much as it could outside of Clayoquot Sound. So there was those very tangible things. But I think when we're going to end, I know we need to end, so I'll leave it here, but I think one of the most important things that I learned in trying to analyze what happened in Clayoquot and what it means for what we can learn for future environmental campaigns was that moment of '93 was a tipping point moment. It happened because of all the hard work. I think I saw Bonnie and Dan here and a bunch of other people and you, Maureen, and many others for decades, right? And lots of hard work of people working on forest issues not even in Tofino. It was a moment where, social change is not linear. It bubbles up and happens. And there was that in 1993, people sitting around their kitchen tables across the country were talking about forest policy in the way they are right now about pipelines. I actually think we are living another one of those tipping point moments where the issues are bubbling up and coming to a head. And I'm feeling incredibly hopeful because we have so much we didn't have then, right? Like good organizing then really was about how many people we could get around Val's kitchen table, and now we're connected to thousands in seconds, right? We have so many more tools at our fingertips, and technology is changing so quickly to give us the solutions we need to have a strong economy. Renewable energy is now at scale in a way that it couldn't be before. We're living a moment when it's not just about one issue in one town anymore. It's about re-envisioning industrial society. And that's incredibly exciting. So I think we need to figure out what more we can learn from Clayoquot and then take it out.
One of the ongoing legacies of Clayoquot, like Sapara was saying, was the stories that came out of that are personal relationships. I met my soulmate, my partner, Jude Abrams, through Clayoquot, working on Clayoquot, and I know you and Chris got together, and I know lots of other people as well. And in the context of the big issues, it may seem to be a little trivial, but it's not in my life and in your life, I know, and your sons, exactly. that they were birthed because of Clayoquot, and that's a very powerful thing. So getting young people involved in environmental issues, here's an attractive thing. It's like, come and meet your soulmate. You're doing what you love. you're working out your passion, and you're going to meet people who are the same. And it's fabulous. I mean, I'm so glad that Jude and I met through that. And one of the other legacies is that it's not over. It's never over. That was a moment in time. There's decisions. There's things that we win. We make progress, but we can't just sit back and go, it's all taken care of now. Everything's fine. We'll just go and play. No, it's every generation, every year. We have to keep working and try to protect more, try to bring positive vision into this world. So the work is never done, but we also need to play. We also need to get out and get a life, and especially kids these days, get them off the computer, off the screens, get them outside, have those personal experiences like I was explaining about, for me, made a difference. Let them have those experiences, fall in love with this amazing world, with all the beings here. And when you love someone, you stand up and protect them. So I think that's a legacy that we need to continue. We need to give those opportunities to our young people and to all of us. So get out and get a life.
I want to say that maybe 20 years later, sitting in this room, it all looks so clever. But we didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea. We really didn't, that it would lead to this. So, to me, legacy in some ways is just following your heart. I mean, we were just doing what we knew how to do and what we had energy for. There is, I often sort of equate it to, you see a child in the middle of the road. What do? You don't talk to your neighbor about what we should do or make a plan or go online. You just run to the middle of the road and you grab that child. And, our climate is a child standing in the middle of the road. And each of us has to run in and grab that child, whatever that looks like for each of us. There is no silver bullet, there is no right way, there is no wrong way. There is just each of us acting from our hearts with our deepest commitment and giving everything that we have to give. Maybe for me, that's the biggest legacy. There's lots of, as I start to think about, I think there's so many ripples that rippled out from Clayoquot. I think there are so many, let's just give thanks and give pause that those intact areas are still intact. And the work is never done. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. But, it's like any relationship, or the love relationship we have with this place and other places takes work. And so we will do the work and we will do it gladly. And there are so many other protected areas that I know, and John will know more, that were protected because the government had to reclaim their social license. There are, changes in forest practices, on and on and on, changes in the environmental movement. So my point is, you don't know what your impact is going to be. You don't know what your legacy is going to be. But that's not a reason to not act. It's a reason to act, because we can never know. We just know there is the value of the action and putting our life in line with our values. For me, I'll just end by saying maybe the biggest legacy is from the words of my son, who was conceived on the Blockades. And was that an overshare? Oversharing. Not actually on the Blockades, but in the summer of '93, let's just say. And he said to me this summer, he's 19 now, of course, if you do the math, and he said to me, Mom, my friends and I have been having a conversation for over a year now, and our conversation is, what is our Clayoquot Sound? What is my responsibility? Where will it be my place to stand up? And I think it's the tar sands, but I'm not sure. But this is, for us, the question of our lives. What is our Clayoquot Sound? So maybe that is the greatest legacy, our inspiration that it can be done, it will be done, and we will do it.
Well, I want to thank you for the honor of being here on this panel. This has been quite a moving experience for me. I want to pick up on this theme of young people. You have a wonderful person working in your organization, Emery, who phoned me and asked me if I would be on this panel. We did have a few chats on the phone, and I learned in one of those chats that he was quite a young child in '93, and I got to thinking that that is so much the case, that there are people that have come along now that are interested, but they weren't there then. They didn't have a chance to know the entire story. They didn't have the frame of reference to really understand how that all came about. And it's one of the reasons why it's so very important to tell the story, because children are interested in this. It was interesting, just before the panel started tonight, I was having another one of my enjoyable chats with Emery, and he said, well, good luck. And you sure as hell better have some excuses once you're up there that make some kind of sense. And there's somebody who's really been influenced by hearing the story and having a sense of the urgency and indeed some of the anger that is necessary as you go through that process of making change. My grandson, when he was 7 years old, was with me when I pulled into a service station, and he gave me a lecture on why that was not a good service station for me to go into, because this service station was associated with the same company that had the Exxon Valdez, and he went on in great detail about how I was being quite hypocritical. And I think one of the points we need to make is that sometimes we want to shelter our children and protect them. But, you know, they have to learn some of the real hard facts of what we're up against if we're going to change the world. We were down at Schooner Cove the other day, and we saw a subdivision there that was really interesting. It looked as though it had been built about 40 years ago. I don't know if that's true, but I was trying to figure out how far the top of the high tide line was from those houses, say 50 years ago, or when they were built, compared to what it is now. And I know at our co-op on Cortez Island, the foreshore of our place has gone back about 30, 40 feet since we got the place in 1973. And it's something like you put a bunch of frogs in some hot water and just turn it on very gently, and they don't even know they're being boiled. Some of the processes that are happening seem to be happening awfully slowly, but they're not really when you look at put it in the larger context. So I just want to say in my final comment that I can't agree more about the importance of the story being understood by the children, and them also realizing that they have a responsibility that will one day be the responsibility that they have to their own grandchildren who are yet to inherit the earth.
Wow, what a responsibility to have the last word. Sit back, folks. Get comfy. This is an incredibly hard act to follow, right? There's beautiful words that have been said about what the legacy is, and I think the only thing left to say is probably some names, and just names of people who 20 years ago were young folks, some not so young, but still incredibly active, who were inspired and who continue to be inspired and who have gone on to inspire others. It's that, one gets inspired, goes off and inspires a dozen others. And I think of Garth Lenz, who was with the Friends of Clayoquot, who is now inducted or a member of the International League of Conservation Photographers. And from his work in Clayoquot got known and has documented the tar sands, logging in Indonesia and in Borneo and all over the world. And his work has helped other organizations be able to tell the story. Ken Wu, who runs the Ancient Forest Alliance, who was, I don't think he was shaving yet when he asked what he could do for the blockades, and we said, you're going to UBC, first year biology. Oh, what can you do? How about you organize some people to come up? And it's like, then it was like bus loads of students came up. He rented the buses. He figured out how much each person should pay. He was the ultimate, organizer right then. And he's like, we're here. And it's like this huge bus shows up. That's the kind of, so the folks like Ken and I mean, there are folks in the environmental movement now, some who are working professionally, some who are volunteering. There are people like Don Christian from the east side of the island who called into the CBC program. I haven't spoken to Don in a decade or more, and she's active in conservation in her community on the east side of Vancouver Island. There's the Clayoquot blockades spurred the Clayoquot Rainforest Coalition, which became Forest Ethics. There's an organization with now almost 30 people who work both in the United States and Canada, and that's because Clayoquot Sound started the kind of activities and market campaigns. Canopy, the organization that Nicole Rycroft runs, was started because of the Clayoquot campaigns. I mean, these are legacies of one thing here, and then people just kind of fanned out when the sort of heat of the moment ended in Clayoquot. It did not end here. It just went whoosh, and it went to Germany. It went to Japan. Joe and I have worked with, and Dan and Bonnie have worked with folks in Japan who are inspired by Clayoquot Sound, and it continues. So there's the legacy of the people who have just kept going. Some of whom are here today on the panel, and many who are off in various parts of the world. And then I want to name some places, because had we not done the work we'd done to get the 12,000 people we counted to the blockades, and all of the profile, and actually some of the work prior that led to the Clayoquot land use decision itself, because a third of Clayoquot Sound was protected in 1993, and then successive work has gone into almost 60% of Clayoquot is now off limits to logging. And so there are places that we can name: the Clayoquot River Valley, the Ursus Valley, Bolson Valley, Mears Island, which was an effect of the 1984 protests, the Pretty Girl and Easter Lakes, Sulphur Passage and Shelter Inlet, Meejan River, Sydney Inlet, Heshquit Point Creek, Sachi Creek. These places are beautiful, beautiful places. And when I said at the beginning that it was 900,000 cubic meters of wood a year, it's hard to conceive of that amount. That's like every day one of those massive barges loading up and going out, and truckloads every day. You pass them all the time on the road. It was constant. Had this not happened, those places I just named, the things that you look out at when you look out from here, would not be here. You would be seeing something very, very different. And that's the legacy. That's the real legacy.
just a couple of things to say, and I'm going to invite Emery and Jillian. Is that Jillian here? Yes, thank you. First of all, let's just have one huge round of applause for our panel. How about all the volunteers that put this incredible evening together? Come on up.
Josie, can I just say one thing?
Dorothy, please.
Thank you. Because this is a big issue to me, that these stellar people can tell us these stories and champion continually for the environment. But we have the Friends of Clayoquot Sound in this community, and one would think with the tourism economy that came as a result of the lenses being placed in Clayoquot Sound and the whole world being shown what we have, one would think that the Friends of Clayoquot Sound would be one of the wealthiest environmental organizations, and I suspect that they're not. And I know there's t-shirts being sold and hoodies and stuff, and I hope people will think of buying those and wear them proudly, but also, you know, whether it's $10 or whatever, we're about, I don't know you, Emery, but I hope to, and somebody's got to pay your salary, you know, and this is where on the ground I think about local government. That's great. We've got Mayor Osborne stepping forward. How awesome is that? Yeah. And everything's never stopped. But I think, and they can tell me if I'm wrong, but I suspect not, that they need support. So just whatever the organization, I just want us to help however we can, but if we can do it with cash, that's a good thing. Here, here.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. Our table is there. You can sign up for our mailing list, and we do have monthly donor forms. And Michael is back there selling t-shirts. They're really, actually beautiful. It's Joe David's Wannages Life of Mears Island print on the front or back. So I'd like to thank all of you on the panel tonight. That was really amazing. I just started campaigning for the Friends. This is my first job at the university, actually. That's amazing. As John mentioned earlier, I was 2 years old when the blockades happened, and it's been amazing coming here and learning this history and living what's happening now. We were so close. You know, working with the Clayoquot Sound Conservation Alliance, we're so close to coming to a really sound solution for the forests here in Clayoquot Sound that really empowers the local community and that protects those amazing old growth rainforests. And it's been amazing kind of coming up and stepping in these shoes of people who've become giants. And as Valerie was mentioning, Clayoquot Sound has become this this spawning ground for people everywhere in Canada who that was their starting point. That was, the Clayoquot Sound launched an activism that's affected my generation. And it's because of people like you guys that I get to stand in the shoes of giants but also stand among giants in Clayoquot Sound. You can see those trees. And so Jill and I have some small gifts. They've been donated by Sea Winch Naturals. Thank you, all of you, for coming out. That was really amazing. We also have refreshments at the back. We'd like to invite everyone to hang around and talk. We're hoping the panelists will hang around and address your questions. Sorry, we also have a door prize, which we'll do at the end, because I want your attention. Yeah, so please hang around. There's lovely food prepared by one of our board members, Stephen Ashton. So hang around. For those who are creative mind and are a little bit inspired, we have a graffiti wall. It says, "What do you love about Clayoquot Sound?" Please feel inspired. There's paint, there are felt markers. Write us a message, paint us a message, doodle. It's a graffiti wall. Go, be free.
Can we watch the video again?
And then Nettie Wildway still be around. She has the DVD, I think. Rob Renna has kindly, so actually, it's time to move on to thank yous. So thank this panel. I'd like to thank all the people. I know there are many people in this audience who were arrested in '93, and you know, it's you guys too are the reason that I get to stand among giants when I go out into Clayoquot Sound, and that anyone here today who goes out into Clayoquot Sound can still benefit from that. But we also have an amazing core group of volunteers. Rob Renna and Kevin have both volunteered to come and set up all the sound system. We had a number of volunteers helping us set up the stage today. We had a tremendous financial assistance from our allies in the Clayoquot Sound Conservation Alliance. We also had a number of corporate partners in the community donate things such as the gift baskets from Sea Wench Naturals. We had the Raincoast Inn donate some accommodation. I have to switch my notes here.
Where'd the chairs come?
And the chairs were very kindly donated by Leanne Unger and Denise Koshowski. So that's thanks to them that we, and thanks to the Tofino Botanical Gardens, we have the tables that help add to our living room atmosphere. And in our gift basket tonight, we have products from Tofino Sea Kayaking, from Mermaid's Tail Bookshop, from Mark Hobson's Gallery, from Sea Wench Naturals, from Chocolate Tofino, from Tofino Tea Bar, from Tofino Coffee, Reflecting Spirit Gallery, and Green Soul Organics. You want that basket. And of course, I'd also like to thank Jill. She's my coworker with the Friends. So is Marika. Marika's in here also. And Marika's been with the Friends for 22 years. Thank you very much, Marika, for flying out and being with us tonight.
She's saved more trees. She's one of those people who doesn't get the credit.
Yeah.
She has saved more trees than anybody here.
Yeah.
Hey, get your tickets out.
Of our Clayoquot Wild Weekend, we have 2 more events. Tomorrow night on the Village Green in Tofino, we have a free outdoor concert. We have Bob Lawson playing, and we have local Tofino band. We have a Rooftop Runners from Berlin who will also be playing. It's at 7 p.m. on the Village Green. We also have speakers. Tomorrow night's theme is, tonight is like retrospective. Tomorrow night is looking ahead, so we have Terry Dorward from the TFN speaking about tribal parks and what the flow crews are doing to assert their land vision. We will have Valerie Langer speaking about the future of Clayoquot Sound from the perspective of the Clayoquot Sound Conservation Alliance, and we'll have Sven Robinson speaking, doing a reappearance after 20 years. And Saturday we're heading out to Kennedy Lake. We'll have some tree climbing lessons, we'll have some paddleboarding, kindly donated by Teshi Paddle School. And we'll also do some interpretive forest walks, some really nice bonfire in the evening. We have a lot of fun, so come out and join us. Michael Mullen, Eileen Floody, Stephen Ashton, Patrick Canning, and Greg Blanchette. Nancy Powers doesn't like to say she's on the board, but she's been really instrumental this summer as well. So thanks to all of you as well.
Well, it was an extremely powerful evening, and so on a lot of different levels, it was wonderful to see a lot of old friends that I haven't seen for a long time. I mean, over the last 20 years, I've seen Valerie and Sephora from time to time, but to sit down and be talking about the Clayoquot experience with them, with Maureen Fraser, with people who've been my friends for a long time, to see John Kishore again, there was a lot of layers to it. There's the personal, then there's the reflection, and I think it was a very powerful and emotional evening, and I meant it. It was a huge honor to be included in that group. I think Valerie nailed it, that we do have work to complete here in Clayoquot Sound. We need to get the remaining protected areas protected and legislative protection. My work at the federal level is a little bit different. I'm focusing on, as you can tell from my comments tonight, figuring out ways to revive democracy, to reduce the control that powerful backroom spin doctors have over everything that most members of Parliament do or say. And I'm very liberated from that, being a Green Party member of Parliament. And when there are other Green Party member of Parliament, they will also be liberated. But right now I've got quite a big challenge as the only Green. But I'm hoping that before long that I won't be the only one, and we'll be able as a group to encourage Canadians to believe that parliamentary democracy still works when there are people there whose first responsibility is understood to be working for their constituents and working for the good of the country, and not taking their marching orders through a very, very hyper-partisan lens. I think we, as activists, a lot of us have moved, as Sephora has, as I have, into the climate crisis as the overwhelming threat. But it doesn't mean you don't also have to pay attention to fish farms and forests and protecting the old growth and protecting our ancient forests and keeping ecosystems intact. You kind of have to do all of it at the same time.
Well, I thought it was an excellent evening. It's so important in dealing with Clayoquot Sound and the people that have made an incredible change, not only in what's happened in the Sound, but in the way in which people are dealing with civil disobedience as a means of getting governments to get up and take notice, and to do it in a respectful way. A great deal has been learned in the process of the success on Clayoquot Sound. And I think coming back after 20 years to be able to reminisce together and reflect and see what all of us has learned, because we're all going through a learning process and trying to find out how we carry on and keep moving an agenda that's a positive agenda for future generations forward. It requires that we be as effective and respectful and caring as we possibly can. My thoughts on the 93 decision, as I said during the meeting, I think we got it wrong. I think the context in which we did so was understandable in view of the legacy that we'd inherited with regard to the clear cuts, the progressive clear cuts, and what was happening in the forests, and also the very legitimate issue of jobs for people in the forest industry, which was our chief economic mover at the time. And so it was a decision that was a difficult one, but Cabinet making that decision felt that the processes had gone on for a long time, going back into the previous government, and that it was time to, given the fact that we'd already indicated that we were doubling the park and wilderness part of the province within 10 years, given the fact that we'd brought in the toughest pulp pollution guidelines anywhere in the world, there was the government thought that this would be something that would be able to be handled. But the fact was there was a force here that needed to be reckoned with. I wanted it to be referred to the Commission on Resources and the Environment. I didn't win that argument, and so the rest is history.
Can you be more specific on why you thought it was wrong? Wrong decision?
Well, the specifics of my point were not the specifics of the key issue. They were the specifics of us following a process that we had set up to refer it to the Commission on Resources and the Environment. I think it's quite possible that the result might have been quite similar, but I think from a political perspective that still would have been the prudent thing to do. But the fact is, the rest is history, and we've all moved on. And the key question is, where do we go from here? But I, for one, who was a member of that cabinet at that time, I want to express my respect for the way in which civil disobedience was applied as one of the marks of a healthy democracy. And I think that we need to respect that, and I certainly do. Well, I think that listening to the panel tonight, it's on a number of fronts. And one front was that we really have to do an important job of enabling young people who aren't part of that history to recognize how important it is to take the values that are ecological values, spiritual values, and apply them so that those values move forward into the kind of decision making that enables us to leave a legacy for future generations which they are going to inherit from us. And if we continue to destroy habitat, if we continue to alter the way in which our world is created to the extent that sustainability is gone, how are those future generations going to view that?
It sounds like you're even greener than you were then. Is that the case?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I brought in a program to our government which had accepted that called for the doubling of park and wilderness areas in the province with the remarkable goal of accomplishing that within 10 years, and that was accomplished. We have many other initiatives that were happening at that time, and as you know, public opinion fluctuates a great deal, and usually public opinion is very much on the side of what is referred to as the economy. In my view, you can't have an economy if you don't have a healthy environment.
It was really fun getting together with a bunch of people who I was part of a life-changing and provincial changing moment with. You know, it's not every day that you get that kind of group of people, that breadth and depth of knowledge, and really some amazing folks like Elizabeth and Sephora, Karen, John Kishore. I've never spoken with John Kishore in this context before. So it was just really kind of fun to have that time pass, reflect back again, and do that reflection with people that shared a moment in history with me and with the rest of the world. Well, actually, earlier in the evening, John and I had a conversation where I said, you know, back in that time we were really angry with the province and we didn't really have a lot of experience, and in hindsight we would have spoken to you once or twice, and he said, no, it's probably better that you didn't, because there are things that happen with the energy that just happened to be at that time that would have been impossible had you tried to get us into a conversation. I think that's true. It's like it was unpredictable. What John had to say was news in that they were thinking about different kinds of things. They had a different set of pressures, and we were one of those pressures. We needed to be there. We were not what they had planned, and they were not what we had planned, and because of that, something completely new happened in Clayoquot Sound. I thought what he had to say was interesting. I learned about what the government was thinking about doing, and I'm interested to see in 5 years what the documents have to say when the Privacy Act lifts off of the cabinet documents. I can gather, and from what I know John Kishore from other contexts. He's a very committed, strong environmentalist, and I'm sure that within his cabinet he would have been one of the advocates for more fulsome conservation in Clayoquot Sound. They had other pressures, and obviously there were some folks who backed the logging companies over the conservation. But history has played out differently and continues to in Clayoquot.
It is so fun to remember and hear the stories, and hear the stories, and that you've forgotten, and just to reflect. I think it was a great evening. I think the Friends did an amazing job organizing it. It was so great to see a super packed house, and I think taking the time to reflect on our history and learn and share the stories is really important. And, you know, we learn by stories. That's how humans learn. And so to keep these stories alive, telling them, I think, is a really important part of the legacy of Clayoquot Sound. There's also a lot that we didn't get to talk about. There's a lot of, I think, valuable lessons in mistakes we made. I was talking to John Kishore, it's hard not to call him Minister Kishore, about, you know, the ways in which we targeted the government overly aggressively, or, you know, and the way we backed them into a corner and didn't give them a graceful way out. And so many lessons that we learned that I think have informed environmental campaigns since that time, going forward. But, you know, it's great to learn from our successes, and it's equally important to learn from the mistakes that we made.
I had a great time tonight. It was really inspiring to be in the company of people who were so involved during the summer of '93, and to hear the stories about how they got to where they were, why they decided to take part in the civil disobedience, and what their role was. It was a fantastic evening. It was really important to me to come tonight and to participate, because I think that the community we have today here in Tofino, the diversity that we have, the sheer beauty of Clayoquot Sound and everything that we look at, we value, is in part due to what happened in the summer of '93 and the actions that took place before in the '80s and even before then. And maybe it's a little forgotten today sometimes. We have a fantastic ecotourism industry here in Tofino, and there's reasons why that this place still looks the way it does, and that people they flock to it, that people come here and want to be here and see what we get to live in every single day. It's a very important thing to remember and to reflect on and continue to learn from.
Well, I was really honored to be part of the panel this evening, because this was the first time that a lot of different players got together and talked about their involvement in Clayoquot Sound '93. So it was really wonderful to get all the different stories, all the personal perspectives, all in one evening. I've heard some of them, but not all together like this. So for me, it was just a real honor and a wonderful opportunity to hear others, and also to be able to speak again for Clayoquot Sound. It was very interesting for me to hear John Kishore, who was Minister of Environment at the time of the Clayoquot land use decision, and to hear his perspective from inside the government and the internal discussions that were happening, and how one perspective won out that was not what the environmentalists really were hoping for and wanting, and but how it could have been different as well. And it was really good to hear that, because a lot of us had a lot of anger around that decision, and that's what motivated us, love and anger, to go to the blockades. And it's good to hear from someone inside government what really goes on, and to understand the constraints that they're working under, and the pressures that they face, and perhaps how to help influence the decisions now that are being made. 20 years later, it's great to be back here in the Sound, to see how it's changed. Tourism has certainly exploded. Clayoquot Sound '93 really put Clayoquot Sound on the world stage, and hopefully we can get some more protection happening because of that international exposure, people coming, and I hope we can get some more of the valleys, intact valleys, protected, and continue the effort. The work is never done. Continues to go on. All us old gray-haired people here, we're still involved, but we need young blood to take up the baton and to continue on. So I think this can be a really good opportunity to see that happen.